I was initially going to post a video of an update covering all Vox AC15C1 amp mods as of 2014, but I decided that I should post just a separate video on choosing the right tubes for the AC15, because a lot of guys I think have this question and it's a really detailed answer. I've been swapping out tubes in the AC15 since I got it about a year and a half ago, and I've tried new production tubes. I've obviously tried the stock tubes, and I've tried about 30 different vintage 12AX7s and 5751s. I have my own personal favorites, so this is going to be an opinion video. I'm going to start by talking about changing out the preamp section of the amp. Now, it's important to understand how it works. So, your V1 will provide you with the biggest change in tone, because the V1 is one half of the V1 is dedicated to your normal channel, and the other half is dedicated to the first gain stage of the top boost channel. Now, your second preamp, which is second furthest from the power tubes, the one that doesn't have a shield over it, is the second gain stage of the top boost channel. The third preamp in line is the phase inverter, and this one will always be closest to the power tubes. The phase inverter doesn't provide as big of a tonal change as the other ones. However, it's very important. I'll definitely get into talking about that. Back to the V1. Now, when you're testing out tubes in the V1 section, leave it in the normal channel, because you will actually hear just that tube. Instead of, if you're in a top boost channel, you'll hear one half of that tube mixed with the other half of the V2. When swapping out the tubes, the first tubes I tried were JJ's, and I was not so impressed by them, as I usually am not. I also tried a new production tongue sole. I tried a new production Mullard, which the new production Mullard sounded best out of those. However, they just didn't have character, in my opinion. New old stock vintage tubes are the way to go. You will pay more money, but they are just, here's the JJ's, the best of the JJ's here, and here's the vintage new old stock tubes here. The worst vintage new old stock tube is about this much of a difference. It's just night and day. I went and bought a ton of vintage tubes and started tube rolling over the past 3 or 4 months. My favorites are the RCA 5751 black plate. That sounds fantastic in this amp in the V1 stage. It sounds very similar to a Mullard, and it's cheaper. So if you want that sort of Mullard sound, go with the RCA, because it really does sound very similar. Like, I probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the Mullard that I have and the RCA. The next one would be the vintage Mullard. I had for about a year, I had a vintage Mullard 7025A. So it's a low noise version of the 12AX7 in this amp, and that tube sounded absolutely fantastic. Just beautiful is the only way to describe it. The next one I'd like to talk about is the Sylvania JHS 12AX7 long black plate. This tube sounds awesome in everything I've tried it in. It sounded awesome in the AC4. It sounds awesome in the AC15. These are prone to microphonics, so you want to make sure that you find a good one. However, Brian May of Queen claims that he tubes all his AC15s with the vintage Sylvania black plates. And they have this very neutral sound to them, but there's this really nice top end to it that I have never heard in any other tube. My personal favorite is the Raytheon 12AX7 long black plate. This tube just has everything. It has the characteristics of European tubes, as well as the clarity and detail that you find in, US tubes. These are really rare and extremely difficult to find, but if you find one, hold on to it because it really is a magical tube and it sounds fantastic in this amp. It's my all-time favorite. Other tubes I've tried, EI pre-war Yugoslavia, ECC83, that sounded okay. I've tried Tungsram 12AX7 or ECC83, whichever you want to call it, which sounded very, very good in this amp. It sounded very similar to the Mullard again. I've also tried the Telefunken ECC83 rib plate in this amp, and I really like that tube. However, it was outshined by the Sylvania and the Raytheon in the V1 stage. The breakup that Telefunken has is unbelievably good. It's like heavenly. I've never really heard a tube break up the way a Telefunken does, and it's my all-time favorite. So moving on to the V2 stage of the amp, this is where I have the Telefunken. The reason I put the Telefunken there is because the V2 is dedicated to the second gain stage of the top boost channel, so it's technically your overdrive tube, and the Telefunken was the overdrive that I preferred, so I put it there. Now, the Sylvania has an awesome overdrive as well. The Raytheon, not so much. The Raytheon, more for clean. The Tungsram ECC83 also had an awesome overdrive, and the Mullard, of course, has an awesome overdrive. It's all in what your preference will be for the tube. This is why I recommend even going out and buying a bunch of used ones and just seeing what you like. As far as the phase inverter goes, I overlooked this for the longest time. I had one important thing about the phase inverter is you want to put a balanced 12AX7 in this position, meaning you want balanced triodes and close and tight sections. I'm not really sure why you need this, especially in the AC15 circuit, which is erratic anyway, but it apparently does make a difference, and it's going to prolong the life of the power tubes. When I started messing with the phase inverter, I tried a couple different tubes. I all of a sudden realized that I put a specific tube in there and realized that this was the big secret, because it took a really good sound and all of a sudden just added like this warmth to it. As far as the power tubes go, I haven't had a lot of experience swapping out different power tubes. The power tubes won't make a huge difference in the tone, although I find they add to the silkiness of the tone if they're going to do so. And what I mean by silkiness is it's like you can't really tell, like you can't find words for a difference, but you know it did something. And this is what happened when I put Tungsram EL84s in it. Now, the Tungsram EL84 is regarded as one of the best power tubes ever made. They're actually pretty cheap compared to a lot of the other European brand power tubes from the 60s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. I highly recommend these. You can still get them at a good price, and they will last so much longer than the new production tubes. However, seeing that there isn't a huge change in the tone, even putting new production tubes in the power section really won't hurt you if you want to just change out the preamp section of the amp with vintage tubes. So you can kind of do half and half if you wanted to. It's just important in a cathode biased amp like the AC15 to make sure that your power tubes are matched. So you need to buy a matched pair. So I will post links. I have multiple videos of tube swaps, you know, an A/B comparison between my AC4 and AC15, so you can kind of hear the difference and stuff. What I don't have is a comparison between the stock and the modified amp. I do want to, in the future, get another AC15, so what I will do when I do that is I'll do a video of the stock versus the modded AC15. I can tell you that after I modded this amp, I have gone to Guitar Center and played the AC15s there, and my amp blows them away. These mods really, really do work, and I strongly recommend doing them. However, you know, it's one of those things where you got to open up your wallet if you want results with this amp. It's a bargain at $600 to buy this amp stock. It's an absolute bargain because it sounds fantastic from the factory. However, it doesn't sound anything like a vintage amp, and it really doesn't sound anything like the hand-wired version of the same amp as well. But having said that, I've tried my amp against a hand-wired version, and it blew that away as well too. So the secret, I think, is really in the tubes and the speaker. You know, you get a Celestion Nickel Blue, you're halfway there. You put any vintage tubes in this amp, and it's going to absolutely scream. It's going to sound just like the old ones.